Hello. Just want to check that am I audible?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So, good evening, everyone. I welcome you all to the webinar conducted by the Internal Audit Standard Boards of ICAI and to today's webinar called Techniques to Evaluate the 7E's of Internal Audit. Before we begin, just a quick announcement. I request all the participants to kindly keep them muted during the session. Also, you can post your questions in the question and answer chat box so that we can take them up at the end of the session for sir to answer. Now, I just give me this opportunity to kindly introduce myself. I'm Chartered Accountant CM Ranalini Damble, practicing in the area of insolvency plus indirect taxes as well as internal audit, and associated with AM Dapke and Associates. It's my honor to guide this webinar and ensure a smooth flow of discussions. Due to some urgent commitments, our chairman and vice chairman sir could not join this webinar, and on behalf of them, I extend my warm welcome to all the participants and thank you once again for joining. Now, I would like to give a brief coverage about the today's session. So let me just give you a brief. Internal audit today extends far beyond compliance. The 7E's framework, that is the economy, efficiency, effectiveness, equity, ethics, environment, and excellence, they provide a comprehensive approach to evaluate the true value that the internal audit delivers. Today's session will equip us with practical techniques to evaluate these 7E's so that our audits are not only technically sound, but also are forward-looking, impactful. With this backdrop, it is my privilege to introduce our eminent speaker, CA Paul Jaikar sir. Dr. Jaikar sir is a fellow chartered accountant with over 40 years of experience, bringing together deep expertise in finance, risk management, and information technology. He holds a PhD in Internet Security from the University of Madras and has pursued specialized certifications in insurance and risk management, cybersecurity, AI, and ethical hacking. He currently serves as a director, IT and risk management services at C&K and Associates LLP and as an independent director at Panasonic Carbon India Company Limited. Over the years, he has worked with the leading organizations like Ernst & Young, Macmillan India, and Otis Elevators, and has also led technology and consulting firms in senior leadership roles. In addition, he has also carried out the international assignments in USA, Malaysia, Sri Lanka, and has been a teacher and a mentor for more than 4 decades, delivering lectures at prestigious institutions such as the University of Madras, IIT Madras, and ICAI. He has also contributed significantly to the Institute of Internal Auditors, serving as the past president of Madras chapter. With this rich and diverse background, we are privileged to hear his insights today on 7E's of internal audit. So I request all the participants to please join me in welcoming Dr. Paul Jaikar, sir. I now invite sir to please deliver his address.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Over to you, sir.
Thank you. I'll just share the screen and okay. So we have got the screen visible. Okay. So anyway, good evening to all the members who have joined, and thank you for the very good introduction. I'll try to cover as much as I can cover within this 2 hours. So basically, the idea is a little different what we are studying today. Now we are looking at internal audit as bringing value to the organization, where we are not focused only on the financial part of it, but we also want to focus on the other aspects, the operational aspects, efficiency, and a lot of things like ethics, diversity, and environment, and so on. Now, these various aspects can be done at two different locations, or two different types of people could use them. One where the internal audit function is within the organization, which is predominant in most of the larger organizations and mostly overseas. The internal audit is an internal function. So they can evaluate the internal audit itself in terms of diversity or efficiency or sustainability. But given the Indian scenario, internal audit is usually done by external auditors or audit firms. We have private limited companies also. We have a lot of people doing internal audits. And this can be applied to the client side. We can use it for the internal audit department itself, or you could use it for the client side. Most of my focus today is using this on the client side. Not so much, same techniques can be used inside, but inside will need a slightly different role because the Indian rules are completely different from the global rules on internal audit. So I'm focusing mostly on using this internal audit, whatever we are going to study, within your client organizations. So with that, I'll start. Anyway, I've got some experience, so that's fine. The seven, they call it 7 E's. It's just like different authors or different researchers and different institutions that come out with some catchy terms. So they found some words starting with E's and the letter E and said, okay, we have got 7 of them. You may find 5 C's, you will find 6 C's, 7 E's, okay, a lot of things. Almost all are the same thing. It's, really nothing different. So I'll go through these one by one. This is just the overall macro level bird's eye view. So the bird's eye view we are talking about is more from the it's more from the point of view of a brief explanation, then I'll go into the details. Now, the economy part, we all understand whether the resources, we are using them at the lowest cost without compromising the quality. Now, this may be applicable to your clients who may be BPOs, mostly there'll be multinational BPOs, where today, because of certain rigid requirements in North America and Europe and some of African countries, chartered accountants are recruited in these BPOs. Huge quantity of them, a large number of them work with these BPOs. Now, is it cost effective? At least it has been so far. Now, with the new changes in the laws and that Hire Act, Halt Act, whatever, we could have some problems. But if you look at the local companies, the Indian company, we have big ones here also. They have started recruiting management students, engineers, because of operational requirements. They have taken doctors if it's an internal audit for a medical, what we call healthcare. They've taken doctors, insurance people. So it's a wide variety. So the cost here, you should not compromise quality, but you may look at a lower cost type of person. See, we use traditionally CAs are used for the financial functions, but today, because you may not be really into finance, it's almost automated to a large extent. You may be looking at other areas where you bring in value. On the efficiency, of course, we have to make sure that when we say resources, it's not always humans. It is also the method by which we do things. How do we actually do? Do we use machines? And of course, today we have to use a small quantity of machine learning or AI, but of course, it's getting bigger and bigger. Not really percolated deeply into the audit fraternity, but it's used widely in all other areas. So we need to look at that also, and whether we are getting the output at the lowest cost. I'm not talking about unemployment here, but what I'm talking about is repetition. Say, for instance, if you could do an audit once a quarter, with automation, you could do a continuous controls monitoring. So that's what we're talking about. Now, effective and efficiency, the point 2 and 3, the difference is effective is we get the work done, we achieve the target. Efficiency is we do the same thing, we achieve the target, but we do it in the best possible way, the lowest cost, least damage, best addition to the whatever the value to stakeholders, which includes the community, people around you, the CSR, I mean, various things happen. So particularly for a large environment limited companies, listed companies, then your outlook completely changes. It's not just effective, it also has to be efficient. Now, ethics is something which, of course, we have the ethics, the institute, say institute. Ethics is there everywhere. Almost every institute has their own code of conduct, standards, ethics. The thing with ethics is, are we honestly doing something with all the following all the rules, but not just in the letter of the law, but also in the spirit of the law. So, I mean, this is something very complex, but I'll just give a small example. See, the Pacific Ocean level is rising. It's all glaciers are melting and many islands are sinking and so on. But when they put cases in the international court, they blame India and China. Though India and China got into this manufacturing only in the last 20, 25 years, that didn't melt the continent. What melted the continent was Europe and USA. They've been polluting it from 1920s, 30s. Their steel mills, they burnt a lot of coal, hydrofuels, and so on. But then the problem is uh, identification of who's following something and who's not following something gets a little difficult. So we need to understand this ethics is a lot more than just basic compliance. It's also honesty and I mean it's a more of empathy. I mean it's more of doing things right. And the equity part is, are we making any divisions? For instance, recent acquisition is Indians take away the jobs which should have gone to the Americans. But then, was it a diversity problem or was it a competency problem? So we need to decide on those things. Now, equity is becoming more and more difficult because, as you know, in India, within the country itself, we have migrants. We call them migrants, though they're all Indians. They're not really migrants, they're just Indians, but we call them migrants where they come from other states to work in the developed states, the poorer states. Now, are we giving them an equal right in terms of whatever it may be, education, insurance, housing? Many large companies have taken it up to provide all this, but others, it's still a little not so acceptable. So we need to do that also. Now, that audit is required because the Europe and US, they're very strict on this diversity, the equity problem. Environment, of course, we all understand. Mainly we worry about pollution, but it's not just the pollution. The ESG, as you know, this sustainability and the governance, we all understand. The environment part is not just not chopping down trees. You can chop down the trees, but you have to again go for afforestation. So, as being done by some of the paper mills, they cut trees, but they also keep planting. So the forests are always revived. So they have taken the help of the local, they call them MOIS, okay, they call the local terrorists out there. And they've given them jobs, they've brought in this afforestation, and a lot of things are happening within India, but globally, it's a little difficult. Then empowerment is, how do we train the people? How do we make them grow along with the organization? So that's the challenging question. Because today, I mean, the usual complaint is youngsters, if we train them, they leave, or if they come in, they have no skills. Now, how do we take them along with the organization? So that's something which the traditional HR function doesn't understand. They need to work more like counselors. I know it's not making sense, but given the change in the economy and the speed at which we are growing, empowerment becomes, I mean, you have to give them something to be proud about, not just the money part, but so many other facilities, recognition, designations, and so many things are needed. So that's the basic overview. I'll go into them in detail. Now, okay, we had to justify why this class today. One is we meet our objectives because every audit has to have objectives. Then we say we go on beyond numbers to include values, fairness, sustainability. Usually, all this is spoken at the board level or at the various subcommittee levels, but we need to bring it down to the real ground level, grass levels. And then we talk about enhancing decision making and accountability. How does it help? Actually, we need to have some other session on decision making, where data is today we use a lot of statistical methods, but they're actually who are operational or what we call quantitative techniques, operation research, those kind of techniques. We summarize the whole thing as machine learning or AI, but we need to use those to take very good decisions. I'll elaborate on this as we go ahead. This is a small picture. Actually, all these are just small pictures. So we look at two bands. One is the external factors. The other is the internal factors. External, we understand this is taught in every management class, business environment, corporate governance, etc., competition, and so on. These you can't avoid because each country has its own laws, rules. We talk about multinationals, international organizations, global presence. I mean, it's common. So because now India is a matured global player, we have to look at all this. But when we look at the internal factors, that's where the internal audit really works. Of course, it works with the external factors also. Now, one is innovating future audits. So I told you it works both ways. This can be applied both within the audit department or for the organization which you are auditing. So instead of always trying to tell the people, okay, you have a bank, you have an NPAs, and we are finding out is it classified correctly, is it broken down the right way? Are people really following the law and following up on the payments and so on? But if you look at a little deeper, you would like to know from that NPA data what type of problems we are having, what type of uh, credit risk management gave us these problems, what type of actually we call it as location, whatever locations, communities, type of loans. Now you go a little deeper, then you're getting into a much better innovative audit, where an NPA audit is not just the classification, which right from Excel up to any of the new languages we use can do, even crores of records. But what we are worried about is, can we change that credit risk, reduce it? Now that's when you start looking at people, organizations, type of occupation, age groups, whatever, I mean, locations, and so many things. That's what we mean by innovating future audits. Then responding to the market. Now today, many organizations, they have problems with their what products to sell. We use, I mean, the traditional term used was in retail marketing, market basket analysis or clustering. It doesn't work anymore. So people don't buy related products the way traditional data tells us. So they would probably look at something else. Traditionally, we probably said popcorn went to the movie or something. Okay, anyway, these are all the old data, I mean, past data. But today we need to start looking at current data and predict. So that's why when we look at these newer audits, let's say it's a movie distribution audit, royalty payment audit, an intellectual property rights audit, or a book, a content, a digital content, like movie, a book, a song, or whatever. Now, traditional audit books and materials don't have much on this. So we need to respond to what the market is doing now. Then developing exceptional people, okay, that's part of our training and whatever we're doing. Then leading by accountability. So, in fact, in at least in 2 or 3 different clients we work with, they have said, look, it's not enough if we get reasonable assurance. Can you give us absolute assurance and take the responsibility for what you are saying? Initially, it doesn't make sense because all the senior auditors will not agree to it because they traditionally they don't give absolute assurance. But now, as we start with machines, see today boilers, any factory, they got DC control, digital controls. I mean, they're not reading meters every 1 hour. That's all online. You can see it in computer screens. Seaports, where the entire loading, unloading is automated. Logistics, where stacking of containers is automated. Or even Swiggy or any of these food delivery people, where IoTs are running fixed onto their motorcycles or scooters. Now we have a lot of data available and we can give absolute assurance, but it takes some reorientation in the audit programs and training. Then acting on audit quality intent. Now, that's what I said, that the audit quality has to be extremely high, where we need to produce, or rather, the client becomes dependent on the internal auditor more as a consultant than as an auditor. So these are nice things to listen, but it takes a complete change in the way we do the auditing. So if we get into the economy, okay, fine, we're looking at the lowest cost, not at the, we're not compromising on anything, but it's trying to keep the cost down. Some example there, office supplies are bought and saving some money and so on. But this is the basic story. That what we really want to know is how do we achieve it? So one is by benchmarking. So a lot of times when we do students projects or this PhDs or whatever, the major problem they say is how do we benchmark something like transfer pricing? How do you benchmark it? So same problem. So if you're taking something, let's say, let's say cost of transportation. One company has a good advantage, they got road and train and whatever. The other company doesn't have that advantage. Bad roads, no train. Now, how do we benchmark? So benchmarking needs some statistical corrections. We say comparable industry, but it's okay. If it is possible, we'll have the data, but otherwise we have to make some corrections. It's called weights. We assign weights to the factors, and assigning weights itself is a huge story. It's a probability story. But anyway, we need to benchmark, and there are enough. Actually, I should have mentioned this at the beginning. Those of you who want to do a lot of statistical processing, SPSS was originally a good package. Then IBM bought it. Now it's expensive. It's priced. So yeah, you have an open source equivalent called PSPP. Yeah, they reverse the P and the S. That's all. SPSS became PSPP. It has all the features of SPSS plus a few extra features. It's open source, very reliable. Don't mix this up with free and shareware and freeware. This is regular open source GNU licensed software. You can download it. It's a good statistical package. And wherever we are talking about the statistical analysis, use that package. At least that's the first step we can do in getting some kind of automated tool other than Excel, something better than Excel into the audit environment. So wherever we use statistics, we can use the PSPP. What I suggest is you can download it, play with it a little bit, then watch some YouTube videos, and I'm sure it'll catch on. Any doubts, you can mail me. I'll definitely handle it. Then we do a cost benefit analysis, which is usual statistical measure, procurement audits, and not only are we talking about purchase prices and procedures, we're also talking about patterns. When we say economic order quantity, it is a traditional formula. I always ask students, why do you have a square root there? Nobody seems to know why it is there, but I'll explain. See, what we are trying to say is between consumption and delivery period, that is the old days when that's all the two parameters they took. But today we have to look at a lot more parameters like storage, pilferage, damages. There's a lot of problems we need to look at, a type of handling resources we require. Say, let's say it's edible oil, or maybe it's something explosive or something which causes pollution. We have a lot of problems there. So, or seasonal product, various things. So procurement audit should get into those areas also. The variance analysis, of course, is budgeted, actual, standard cost, and so on. So the KPIs which people use when we present after the audit is over is say, what was the basis of measuring these things? Okay, we say cost per unit or transaction. That's easy if it is a manufactured product. What happens if it's an hour of classroom training, or it's a 1 hour of service at a hairdressing salon, or if it is like something like an event manager who's handling say a 3 hour event or a 5 hour event. So then also we need to work out the cost per unit. Then of course we talk about the savings we have assumed. Negotiation is one side. Process changes is what we call business process re-engineering. Ford Motors pioneered it, and of course now everybody follows it. Then percentage reduction in unnecessary expenses. I'll also quickly take you through another. I have a Word file which I'll also mail to you. I mean, who was interested, just mail me. I'll definitely send it to you. Now we say we want to do things with we say optimally means, okay, the best possible way we can do something. And there's some example out there, you reduce the repetitive tasks and so on. Then what techniques do we use? Again, we do process mapping and time studies. These are very old, actually. This is Henry Fayol and Taylor and the management experts who did the string diagrams, and they said people walking up and down unnecessary, etc., and so on. Now, if you do a process map, even in a restaurant or any of those places, you will find there's a kitchen, there's a fellow who runs, it's called a runner. He brings from the kitchen to a side table. Then there's a waiter who brings it from the side table to the actual diner's table. There's somebody who takes your order, there's a floor manager. Why do you need so many people? Now, basically, when you map the processes, each one is doing only one process. See, in the kitchen, you may have 5 cooks, specialists, whatever, let's say North Indian, South Indian, Chinese, something. But the runner will be the same. I mean, he can carry any kind of food to the side table. The waiter is slightly different. There are crowded tables, demanding tables, empty tables. I mean, a lot of things there. Floor manager has to solve problems on the spur of the moment. So once we map and do these time studies, we find that a lot of unnecessary cost and repetition comes down. But this is not, actually, there are optimizing techniques also. But if you even start with the string diagram initially, I know it's a little old fashioned, but then we can move on to the optimizing techniques like queuing theory or transport assignment or any of those. Then we have all these KPIs which you have to identify what makes things efficient. I mean, maybe say you're filling, because sometimes I see these olden days, I used to see auto rickshaw chaps filling fuel every short while. They just buy 100 rupees petrol or 50 rupees petrol and refill it. But now I find they go for a full tank. The reason is he's assured of business because of the apps they use, the mobile, what are the Olas and Ubers and so on. So there are performance indicators. The time he loses in the petrol bunk or in the CNG station or whatever, he's making up by loading full day's fuel requirements and then running it the day without stopping for refueling. Something like even airlines do the same thing, but auto rickshaws are easy to understand. So airlines, long distance hauling trucks, they all do the same thing. Then we have even hospitals stocking of drugs. Instead of oxygen cylinders, they've gone for oxygen tanks. There a lot of changes happen. Then data analytics also, I'll try to explain in a very short while. Maybe can have another. See, the whole audit scenario is changing. It all started with the American AICPA people. They came in with some standards on analytics for audit. It used to be a free download when it's a draft. But now say buy it, but don't worry, you can go to Google and still download the draft. It's almost the same thing, only few changes. So if you go through the data analytics for the audit, then we learn a lot more on how can we use these visualization techniques and mathematical techniques to help us out. Waste audits, when we talk of efficiency, waste audits are a very, very complex area, particularly if you're handling a discom audit and they have oil in the transformers, which they have to recycle. There's a lot of environmental material handling. Now they're gone for oilless transformers. They've imported them. Now we're making them also. So the entire oil filling, wastage, pollution, the whole thing is gone now. And some of you will be having the newer vehicles where the service is only once a year, where it used to be so many kilometers, so many months. It's now only once a year. You can, that's it. In electric cars, even that gets reduced. So what do? We talk about resource utilization rates. Again, statistical measures are required. Average time for process step, which can be done manually but tedious. Again, we can automate it, but you need to have sensors at every point, like in a garment factory, anywhere where you're moving things. Actually, it's not expensive. If you see some of the manufacturing units, they put RF tags. It's about like 50 paisa a tag or something. They're reusable. You can peel them off and stick it again. So once you put an RF tag, the material movement of whatever happens through the process, like a pressure cooker manufacturer or a water pump, water motor and pump manufacturer, you can track the process very easily. Then error rates and rework percentages. What we say is you should not have rework, zero defect. But then it happens, I mean, tools are not properly set up or something goes wrong. You have an error rate, or sometimes even in the hospitals, when they open a glass vial, they break it. So that's fine that you have a tolerance on that, but you'll have to make sure those are minimized. So that's why you have these syringes which are electronically activated. So they dispense the medicine. I'm not talking about the insulin pump, that's an IoT, but these are the regular syringes in ICUs and so on. So we do see all these in somewhere in the organization, but then we need to pick up that data and audit and tell the client, the hospital, insurance company, or whoever it is, motor workshop, this is where you're efficient and this is where you're losing. Now the effectiveness part is, are we meeting our requirements for around 4 hours turnaround time for say a motorcycle repair, or are we turning around something like a coffee at a counter should take less than 5 minutes, something like that. I mean, you have so many turnarounds which you have, particularly in malls and peak time when everybody is busy, ice creams and coffees. So what we are talking about is just getting the work done, maybe not efficiently, but just getting the work done. So we look at the goal alignment assessments. Now, see, let me look at it this way. If a train comes to a station nowadays, the stopping time, even for the large stations, is very small, 5 minutes, 3 minutes, something like that. The fellow making, I'm looking at a dosa because from south. Okay, the guy making dosa, it take a long time to make each dosa. So he starts making them ahead, puts them in fairly good quality casseroles, and when the train comes, he's able to serve you, if not piping hot, at least reasonably hot dosas or whatever, idlis or whatever. Now the point is, he was effective, but then was it efficient? So today, if you see the stations, they don't use casseroles anymore. They got huge steaming devices, big stations. So you're able to produce tons of food at a short notice. I mean, it's all there, it's warmed, it's keeping itself going. Like something like those bakeries where they have the heated showcase where your what of puffs and all that pastries, you can pick them out straight away. So that's what we're talking. Getting effective is one thing, making it efficient or economical is the next thing. Then outcome measurement. This is again a very important part because when we do an audit, for instance, we even audit, if you're an internal audit, using this for your internal audit department, we talk about customer satisfaction. How satisfied was the, let's say, internal audit did an audit of the marketing department. How satisfied is the marketing department? Or an audit firm did a audit of some third party company, let's say a tire manufacturer or someone. How effective was that? So there are a lot of things which we need to look at when we look at the outcome measurement. This happens in, actually, BPOs are the worst because they'll tell you 4 minutes for a phone call, 5 minutes for a phone call. Otherwise, the fellow has to assign it to somebody above him, or he has to terminate the call. There are a lot of problems which people face. So given so many problems, it's making things efficient is extremely important. Then we talk about the surveys and feedback. That's what we talk about, satisfaction and so on. And performance reviews, of course, you do them periodically. But if you look at the KPIs, now we are assuming we didn't achieve all our targets if it's effective. So that's why we are looking at percentage of targets achieved. Now, percentage of targets achieved is good, but the thing is that we are assuming that we have not got the whole thing done, that we need to reduce or we need to revise the targets itself. In customer satisfaction is not always a customer, like a third party, like somebody checking in the airport or somebody's ordering food online, not those kind of only, the customers only, but also people who use your services not knowing you're the actual provider. For instance, most of the cell phone towers are owned by a company called Indus Communication. Most of the switches in your underground cable, the cable stuff are owned by Ericsson and Motorola. Now we don't know that, but point is, if they don't do their job right, we blame somebody else. I mean, we blame the service provider or somebody else. I mean, whoever is the face for the service. So customer satisfaction is something which, let's say you're doing a Motorola audit or something, or even better, you're doing a raw material supplier for a pharma industry or a fertilizer industry. Farmer thinks only about the brand of the fertilizer, but the fertilizer company is thinking about the chap who supplied the raw material. Or the raw material chap may be thinking about the transporter who brought it to him without damaging the stuff with rain or whatever. So we have to work backwards to see at every point where customers are happy. Where, I mean, you could be auditing different stages in this whole supply chain management. You'll have to go back and see the satisfaction. It's not always a retail customer, can be anybody, could be even environment also. Return on investment is traditionally it was a easy chapter, but now people are asking return on investment on cybersecurity, return on investment on training. Now these are a little difficult because they're all service oriented, unknown, unpredictable factors oriented. But still, there are techniques. Traditional ROI, where we use the IRRs, paybacks, and DCFs, they are the arithmetic methods. Now we have to move a little forward into that. So, some techniques, that's why I said we will look at those statistical tools and whatever we can move in slowly into the ML world also. Okay, we talk about ethics, and ethics is everything. So, because the first thing you tell a person, not long back when employees used to go to the US and Europe, first thing you tell them is if you get caught by a policeman, don't bribe him. Bribing is the worst thing, they'll put you in jail straight away. So, in India, the exact opposite. So these are something which is completely different location to location. So, going to the techniques, now one of the serious problems we have is ethics is not fixed. Like we have Eastern, broadly we divide Eastern, Western. Eastern culture is different. If you take an auditor out for lunch, a decent lunch, it's not a bribe. But in the West, if you take the auditor out for a good lunch, it's a bribe. Now, how do we know that? So that's the difficulties here. So we have to train them independently, particularly if we're doing global audits. So global company audits. It's a lot of difference there. So ethics needs local definitions. I'm not defining for any particular geolocation or a country, but it needs that because we need to train them. For instance, let's say you're in, say, some country, okay, Muscat or somewhere, and say you're working somewhere and there's a lady there who's willing to drop you. She cannot give you a lift because if you're going to go with a lady in a car, you got to be her relative, otherwise she can't drop you. So you got to go find a taxi, which may be difficult. So what will happen is, I mean, that doesn't make sense in US or even in India, so there's no problem. But those are the kind of specific ethics we need to look at. So compliance audits, okay, we know all this stuff, laws, policies, regulations, rules, procedures, guidelines, safety standards is endless. Now comes the whistleblowing part of it. Now, though we talk of whistleblowing as being secretive and good and okay, whatever it is, now the problem is we need to work very carefully between a whistleblower and somebody who's trying to just get an advantage because he has some grievance. Now that is, it's not actually the method that we, yes, we can have anonymity and all that. Question is, how do you distinguish between a real something going wrong and somebody who's just trying to, he doesn't like his boss, so he's trying to take it out on him. Now this needs a lot of study, but now what we're doing is we're using pattern analysis. Pattern analysis originally was limited to statistics, but now because we have supervised learning and past data, but again, there are complaints about bias and so on. Okay, we have, see, everything has got its own plus and minus, but we have to keep moving. What would if we have a calculator and we exceed the number of digits, you'll end up in an overflow. So maybe get a bigger calculator or break it down into thousands or lakhs or something. So we need to keep moving. So whistleblowing is not bad, but distinguishing between a real whistleblower and somebody who's trying to get revenge on someone has to be separated. Code of conduct assessments, again, it depends on the organization. When what's the code of conduct? So that we have to figure out and do it. Actually, it's a little difficult, this code of conduct, because see, an Indian tendency, I'm not being secretive about it, is to copy. We always copy somebody's HR book or HR manual or procurement manual, then you make some little changes, and that's not always workable because, as I told you, ethics is a completely um, different set of rules. It depends on family-run organizations, MNC organizations. There are a whole bunch of stuff out there. So that we have to be a little careful about this code of conduct assessments. Conflict of interest reviews, apart from all those so-called related parties and what the company law says and so on, income tax and so many laws, we also have to look at other conflict of interest, which is called the grapevine. This is not a formal thing, like something like workers who travel in the same bus or at different levels of um, management, people who probably eat at the same place or play in the same golf club or somewhere. That's what I say golf club. But in India, it will be restaurants, schools where the children study. So a lot of inter gossip will take place. Now, this is something which you have to be careful about because though we try to be so careful, somewhere something leaks out. So with all the NDAs, it doesn't work. So conflict of interest goes beyond those technical legal definitions. You have to be a little careful on this. So how do we work? Number of compliance violations, resolution time for each of those violations to be set right or whatever. Employee awareness. See, basically, employees also may not be aware because see, when we meet someone, we exchange names. Where are you from? I mean, it's like so many silly questions we ask. Nobody thinks of it as privacy. I mean, it's silly. Nobody thinks of it. But in some countries, it's absolutely wrong to ask them, what are your children doing, or where do you live? Or, it's just completely wrong. Again, this needs a lot of sorting out. I'm sure based on your client, which is the country of origin, I mean, where the country they are located, those ethics will apply in the Indian context. It's an Indian company, then there's no problem. It's fine. We use our own ethics issue. And there are a lot of things you may have to train, particularly if you're an audit firm doing audits for different people, a family concern, and maybe an MNC BPO or a MNC manufacturer, or maybe a research institute, all the definition of so-called ethics will be all different. We have to be very careful when we work with them. Now, equity is whatever, okay, everybody stakeholder here. Actually, peculiarly in some countries in Europe, I'm not agreeing with them, but I have to teach you this. See, when windmills run, they make a slight hissing noise. May not be audible to the human ear because our frequency of hearing is low. But some fellow measures it out with a gauge, and then he says the birds are disturbed psychologically. I mean, how do you measure a bird's disturbance, psychological disturbance? All impossible. But fellow went to court and he banned those windmills in Denmark, I think. They banned the windmills. So wind turbines. The problem is this can extend to a completely silly definition of stakeholder. They made the birds into stakeholders. Okay, anyway, it's an extreme case, but it won't happen here. So we need to look at the measurement techniques. So we talk in terms of diversity audits. Now in India, most of the studies I find is only men versus women diversity. They call it gender diversity. That's not the only problem. We have so many problems. Linguistic diversity. We have height-based diversity. Short people not welcome, tall people not welcome. We have old people not welcome, young people not welcome. When you really get into this diversity business, because we get a little biased on the gender, but remember there are so many other factors. I mean, so many other types of divisions we create. So that has to be properly studied. Then we talk about the pay equity. Again, demographic groups means if we just even small talk when we meet somewhere. So one side of same state, they said 100 rupees is valuable, but then the person there told me, I haven't been to the eastern part of that state. 10 rupees is valuable. Same state, one end to other end, 100 becomes 10 or 10 becomes 100, whichever side you're traveling. So that's the pay equity problem. I mean, it didn't make sense to me that time, but once you start studying it a little more deeply, it makes a lot of sense. For instance, most of our coal comes in to Paradeep and okay, between Calcutta and top of Andhra. Okay, those ports handle the coal. It's a highly polluting, dust driven environment. You see, the workers there work. They get very low wages. But you come down to the prosperous ports, Western region, Eastern region, India, I mean, the richer states, they paid a lot of money, but everything is automated. They hardly handle any material. Everything is through conveyor belts and safety containers and so on. So that's what I'm talking about. It takes, again, we have within the country itself problems. Access, now we have to talk about, do they have access to all the information, we call it transparency, whatever, when something happens? You're rejected, you're picked up, you're promoted, you're not promoted. Are you given the right reasons for it? Now, this is not just in employee equity alone, but even among suppliers, because everywhere I see H1 auction, L1 tender. See, basically that's cost based, I mean price based. What about reliability? What about timely deliveries? What about quality of the material? There are so many factors where you say I picked an higher bidder instead of the lowest price. I have to be transparent. I have to say why I didn't pick the lowest bidder. So I mean, I just extend this equity beyond just employees. Then stakeholders. See, what we need to understand is how do they perceive fairness? We are not talking employees alone. We're talking not just customers. We're talking about the entire environment, community, whatever. I mean, all the people around you, not the birds, of course, but everything else. Now, there, when we are talking about these surveys, some are very happy, some are not so happy. Of course, you have to do statistical smoothing for that, exponential smoothing. But what you generally find is where you're running a school, a hospital, or something, they're pretty happy about. Like the 108 ambulance, different companies sponsor it in different states. They're pretty happy about it. But if once the government gets inside, then nobody's happy about it. So these surveys mean a lot to the company because they need to understand whether they are actually comfortable in that location. So I'm just giving a rare example. Like in the Maruti, they had a labor under some years ago, not now. They killed a senior executive. Same thing happened in Regency Ceramics. In Yanam, they killed a very senior person. What happened is Maruti, of course, they managed, but Regency, the owner, just shut down the factory. He said, all of you can get lost. So we need to understand why were the workers, was it an external influence which caused the trouble, or was it really a problem simmering and then it boiled over? Uh, Maybe the internal audit didn't focus on that. Okay, anyway, we have the diversity ratios and gender and minority pay gaps and so on, and grievance report. This grievance is different from whistleblowing. This is something to do with the personal problems, like I didn't get this, I wasn't given this opportunity or whatever. Now, this is the one of the largest and the newest areas which we are all struggling with. Now, this is something to do with the environmental impact. Now, what is environmental impact? So, see, if you take of course, there's a lot of ignorance here. I'm not saying people did it wantonly, but if you see that after the World War II, most of these nuclear plants, actually, Russia and America have a lot of nuclear plants. I mean, they had a lot of nuclear plants. And most of the nuclear waste was put in drums, and they either sealed it in the land or they sealed it under the sea. At that time, they didn't realize drums will rust and leakage will happen. Of course, they didn't know so much. They did something, they thought it'll last a lifetime. I mean, lifetime of the planet. But unfortunately, within 70, 80 years or whatever time frame, some of the containers started leaking hazardous material. Land also got polluted, sea also got polluted. Now, what we say is, of course, they changed the method of nuclear now, fission, fusion, all that. And now, of course, we use other things like solar and wind and so on. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is the sustainability is something which is very complex. If the recent not recent, but sometime few months back, or maybe a year back, less than a year back. A ship hit the bridge in Baltimore and the bridge collapsed. And then they said the ship was carrying hazardous waste, not the entire ship, but some containers. The hazardous waste came from the US. The ship was actually supposed to sail to Sri Lanka. But I'm 100% sure that hazardous waste cannot be recycled in Sri Lanka. It must be destined to be buried somewhere on the sea route somewhere, or maybe that country itself will bury it somewhere. So what we find is, though the discussions take a lot of noise and people do a lot of things on this pollution, handling the pollution itself is a very big problem. Then handling the impact, because we don't know. That's why I gave you the nuclear example, unexploded bombs, lots of things, batteries, for instance. They say lithium mining, Congo, whatever. It's in a very bad shape. Children and people who work in those mines, their fingers are deformed, and okay, it's a bad situation. But lithium itself is a poisonous material. So what we need to understand is, when we do these impact studies, most of the time we are only guessing. We factually do not know what will actually happen. For instance, asbestos. Some of the insurance policies signed in the 50s for reinsurance. LIC was paying even up to the 90s and 2000, because the LIC suddenly they said asbestos is cancer causing, and that's it. You have to pay. And these US guys have a way of suing people, not just actual damage. Some fictitious damage they'll put. Now take the Alang shipyard which breaks ships. Older ships are all lined with asbestos. Same problem again. So basically, if you're an auditor, you can't blame the auditor alone, blame the businessman alone, because maybe we are told, okay, you do this and you neutralize that material, it's no longer polluting, but we don't know. So lot of technical knowledge. That's why many audits you get the help of research institutes. There are a lot of them. Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, they do management, they do science. We got Indian Institute of Science, IITs. So many people are there. Research projects can be funded by industry. They do fund them, and you can get the results from them. The students are hardworking chaps there, so they do a lot of work, and you can get. Now we can also fund students in foreign universities, so that is also possible. I mean, this is something like an audit firm funding a student somewhere for a PhD is never heard of before. But today, yes, if you need the results, you can use it. That gives you the edge over the other competing audit firms. So if you take the methods, yeah, there's evaluation of the impact. And then, of course, we have to measure carbon emissions and a lot of things. So, I mean, see, actually, when we only talk about carbon emission, it's one thing, carbon footprint. But then we talk also about materials, toxic paints. A lot of things are not available today. You can't buy lead, you can't buy asbestos rope, you can't buy white cement. The old white cement, which you used for plumbing, shellac, a lot of things are banned now. So we are using Teflon tape and so on. But how do you know Teflon is not polluting? We don't know that as yet. Right now we are using it. Somebody will come out 10 years, 20 years later and say something is wrong. So this impact assessments need a lot of technical know-how. That's why I always tell an ESG auditor, the E is the most difficult part. Then sustainability audits. Now, can we maintain, see, for instance, what I look at is, I live in a city here, most of the petrol bunks are closing down. Most. Maybe they give different reasons. Land price went up, not enough margin, okay, what are stories. But maybe the real reason of fear in their minds of these owners is, when electric cars take over and they don't have sufficient business, how do they sustain? They can't. Highways you can, but not within the city. So when we do the sustainability audits, and we are probably looking at how sustainable is a petrol bunk today, or how sustainable is a traditional internal combustion motor car spare manufacturer today. And now with these newer IoTs, medical IoTs, how sustainable is that traditional stuff we make, like syringes and capsule plastic and so on? Now those are, I mean, I'm not sure if the auditor really went into all this, did a like robotic surgery, There are a lot of things which, of course, we always say opportunity goes to a few auditors. That's true. I'm not denying it, but once the mass of the, for instance, it's in a very remote location. One of the audits was this guy uses stainless steel rods to make parts. They make all kinds of parts. They make mechanical parts, industrial parts, and they make heart valves also. Same thing. I mean, for him, it's a part, it's a blueprint, it's a CNC machine. Now, sustainability is very important. Now, usage of heart valves is increasing, but usage of other components is actually decreasing because you're putting plastic parts instead of metal parts. So that's the sustainability part. Regulatory compliance checks. I think we'll have to do a lot on this. Now, India, of course, we have the biggest problem. How many acts do you have to study? There's a Wildlife Protection Act, there's a Biodiversity Act, something. Then there is the Heritage Protection Act. All this comes in when you put solar panels on the Western Ghats. I know some, I don't know, deer or a bison or something. It did something, it broke the panels, of course. It got injured. So immediately cases were filed and they said you cannot put up solar panels on the Western Ghats. It's a nice sloping thing. You put the whatever those solar panels you generate power, because finally it all ended up as a protected site, UNESCO, or I forgot which one's World Heritage Site. So many acts. The animals are protected, people are protected, tribals are protected, trees are protected, forests are protected. But where is it in a single act? It's not there. So when you do these audits, one of the biggest headaches you'll have is what regulation or which regulations applied to the customer you're auditing, a power producing company, or the discom company, or the grid evacuation company, or whatever. We are not sure. So it's not just for power, it's almost for everything. Disposable old tires, thermocol disposal. We don't know which acts apply. So only for batteries, they wrote a separate thing, battery disposal rules. And then they said there's an air act for clean air, and they left it off. So beyond that, it's only the pollution act. So and Pollution Act, they can shut down the company itself, close the factory. So regulatory compliance is a challenge, large challenge for the Indian internal auditor. And waste tracking. Now, this is another thing because we don't know what happens to the waste. Once you sell the waste to the chap with the license, what he does with it, nobody knows. But transparency should be there to tell the factory owner or who is producing the waste that this is how we are disposing it. Now, India's got a major problem with this biomedical waste. It's one of the most difficult ones to recycle or get rid of. So, all hospitals produce tons of this waste. And if you're a hospital auditor and if you're in that area, the biomedical waste area, it's a very difficult audit because they can give it to a licensed provider, but if the licensed provider, I mean, the license holder did not do his job properly, the hospital is in trouble. So that's the problem. So we talk about the KPIs, carbon footprint per unit. If you really want to read this, just for at least academic interest, go to the older literature where we talk about those. They were able to sell and buy these carbon credits like a share. You could the bonds you could trade with them. So just go to the older literature. That's stopped now, but you can still go to it, and it'll help you to understand how polluting countries paid and non-polluting countries were able to encash it and sell it. So anyway, percentage of waste, recycle, how much of it do we get back? How much of it do we have to really throw off? Then energy consumption trends. Now, oil, see, India uses a lot of oil, lubricant oil, cooling oil, cutting oil. Because I'm not talking about cooking oil, I'm just talking about these large industrial oil, like transformers, large cutting machines. They use a lot of oil. That oil has to be recycled. A traditional method was you go put in large drums, keep it in the sun, it'll kind of sediment, and you take the top oil out and then throw the sediment out somewhere. But now there are processes to recycle it. You're able to get a large amount of that oil recycled, like say seawater or whatever. The salt is separated from the seawater, and seawater is used for whatever drinking purpose or whatever. The salt can be either thrown back or reused. Now, those are the type of things which we need to work on the percentage of recycling. And then, of course, we have the energy consumption trends in India is very good because we got all these DC motors and LEDs, and I mean, of course, we are on a new technology, so most of the carbon footprint we read from US and Europe does not apply to India because they are still using highly outdated equipment, transformers with winding, a lot of stuff. We don't use those anymore now. So because they use varnish between those one transformers, we don't use that. So consumption wise, India is very good. The audit should be easy, but rest of it wise, it's a little tedious. Now, if we went on to the empowerment, which is like which is more it's not something physical. It's something which we need to. It could be psychological because that's also one of the parameters we have to study. But because there's something called organization culture, behavioral organization behavior. There is human psychology, and so many things are there, which are never brought into audit. They are taught as management subjects, but never brought into the audit component. Now that all that is a little vague. It's very hard to evaluate. So when we talk about empowering the employee, what are we talking about? Is it like just giving housing, food, taking care of the children? It could be more than that. It could be giving him a lifestyle. It could be changing certain patterns of his life. Some say good, some say bad. Okay, we have to work with these. Then, if you see the second bullet, it says encouraging initiative, coming out with new ideas and whatever. Again, it's a little difficult because we still have this traditional British colonial thinking. The higher level person or the lower level person should obey the higher level person. You can't give him a real good idea, but we are now changing. Those attitudes are changing. Okay, so if you look at the measurement, which is one of the most difficult things, we have something called the academic audit. And the word here is training audit. Now, what we are asking is not how many passed, how many failed, how much marks they got. What we are asking is, was the training effective? Whether it can be safety training, it can be whatever, it can be like they have teamwork training, the networking or teamwork training. They have ethics training, they have lots of training. Almost every topic we discussed, they'll train the employees, management, motivation, leadership, all kinds of things. Now, the only thing is, how do we assess the success of that training? Now, that is a difficult job because we have to see the outcome. Actually, we don't do much of this here, but it's called value for money audit or performance audits. Those kind of audits like state grants in the US. You can read the US grant audit, GRANT audit. Whenever they give money, they want to see if the money is achieved what it is supposed to achieve. Now, for instance, in the state I'm talking about, we have something called a noon meal scheme for school children. A free meal is given by the government. But the effect is not whether the meals went right or not. That's a financial audit. They always do it. Internal audit, external audit, whatever. The other side is the student continuing in school? Is his academic performance improving? Have the health, whatever is health parameters, are they improving? When you look at those kind of data for the audit, then your training assessment becomes far more accurate. So then we can say, yes, it's worth, because Tamil Nadu, they give the, I don't know, we have some free toothpaste, tooth powder, I think, tooth powder, brush, slippers, and they had cataract operation, the glasses, a noon meal scheme, and all of them have improved the quality of life. Well, it does, it's good. If it doesn't, then you're wasting money. So you'll have to do something else to empower your staff. The second thing we're talking about, employment engagement surveys. Now, how much is the employee engaged in that particular process or activity, or even in a team outing, who didn't come, who came but did not participate much, who actually participated. So we'd like to have some data on that. And engagement surveys, particularly with regard to the morale, no, means they have a feeling they'll be recognized, they have a fair chance of working, and so many details. I mean, so many stuff we need. I've seen this in the audit when we do this empowerment. The MNC automotive companies pay a much higher salary because they're newer and the costs are higher. That's okay, fine, but they pay a much higher salary. The traditional automotive firms are there for almost 2 or 3 generations. They don't pay, they pay less than the MNCs. But they give them some snacks in the morning, snacks in the afternoon, they give them lunch and whatever, they give them uniform, this, that, whatever. They have some housing colonies and all kinds of, they have schools, something else they do. So finally, when we actually talk to these people, why don't you shift? You'll get more money, so you can be richer. They say that we don't want that money because we get more benefits here and we are taken care of. In fact, many of these companies have a huge sympathy for the employees. So something happens, somebody dies or somebody is not well, they'll give a job to the next person. I know a company where the bookbinding was done by semi-automated workers. Union, usual story, money not enough. So then the MD came out with an idea. He said, look, all of you resign. I'll give you money to buy these bookbinding machines. Entire family can bind books. Of course, we're talking some years ago when families were all living together. You can bind the books. We'll pay you on the amount of books you bind. You can make more money than you're making here because those days communist unions were very strong. So they said, fine. They all went out. Actually, I thought it'll be a disaster, but I was young. But okay, it was not a disaster. In fact, all the other fellows are asking. Once the binding went out, other job people were also asking, can we do it outside on a private contract basis? See, the point is that we need to work with I told you it's a cultural problem, this empowerment thing. So engagement surveys are very important. Appraisal reviews, yes, that is something we need to work with. How do we appraise a person? Because I know organizations which always productivity, minimum cost, savings, targets, financial or unit-wise manufacturing targets. But the basic point is we need to see whether there's a motivation, because if you take the ICF factory in Madras, uh, they hire disabled people, and one set of disabled people are blind people. There are no accidents in that department, though they work with hydraulic presses and they work with, they fix the windows on those doors and side panels. There are no accidents, zero. Then I said, okay, I mean, just for curiosity, what about the past? They said, ever since this scheme was introduced, there are no accidents. But on the other side, where you have people with perfect eyesight, there are accidents. So performance appraisal can be given. It's not always on productivity, but no accident is also a performance appraisal. So I'm sure we have that for bus drivers and so many things. Then organization culture assessments, this we have to study because there's something called an organizational culture and there's a organizational behavior. Now, these are taught as separate subjects. Some of you would be interested. You can just Google it up or use ChatGPT just to learn, what it is. Culture assessments are something which we have to do because before an investment takes place, particularly from the North Europe, Sweden, Norway, Poland, they don't understand a culture at all. I mean, it's totally confusing for them. And they want to know, they want a culture assessment report to be given by the internal auditor. Will they accept? Will they understand? Will they work? So we tell them there's no problem, they'll work late, you drop them home, give them dinner, but then the guys don't believe you. So we have to do a full audit and give it to them. So KPIs, of course, the training hours we spend on the employee, turnover rates and so on. But today youngsters, they turn over even if you give them everything, but we're still trying to find out why they leave. And one of the factors we've identified is they don't want to stay where the parents are living. That's the only factor we have found out. Maybe we'll find other factors as researchers work harder. Okay, then we talk about professional development programs. Okay, this is okay, the standard story. So for each of them, we need to understand, choose the appropriate tools. I'll go to the tools in detail. Yeah, we have time. So yeah, we have a lot of time. So, and then he established the baselines, targets. Only thing is the difference between baseline and best practices. Baseline is the minimum, which we have to have if we have to survive. Baseline. Best practice is something which is way above the baseline. You want to be the best in the industry. Now that is a difficult task, but we have organizations, particularly Japanese companies, Korean also to an extent, but Japanese, they have zero defect. So they don't make any, I mean, they cannot produce a wrong part or a wrong component. There are a lot of things which we learn from their methods of management. There are a lot of things we learn from the Indian family methods of management, where I told you empathy and other things are there. Japan doesn't have that, or not much, but okay, anyway. So we look at the findings and dashboards and scorecards, and there's a continuous feedback loop. That is why semi-automation, at least in the audit, gives us that continuous feedback. See, continuous feedback is an advantage because if something is going wrong, we'll know it very early in the system. We call it outliers, trends. You can easily locate it. Okay, this is fine. I'll just go to the next one. Okay, these are two questions which I'll leave with you. How can you do this in your organization, whether you're the internal organization or you're auditing a client? And which of these 7 E's needs more attention? It can be industry based. It can be actually, we talk about cultural problems. In some places, like say, when we do say an MFI audit, microfinance, honesty, integrity, ethics, that's more important. The guy doesn't pay, it's okay. Somebody will pay for him or nobody can pay, it's okay. But he'll pay you ultimately. He's not going to run away. So in those industries, it's the ethics which probably goes first. All the others, efficiency, economy can wait because it's not running away anywhere. And we did some research, actually took all the cases from the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, Pune, management cases. In Tamil Nadu, there are what we call rags to riches millionaires. One of them was a pioneer in installment sales. It's called Paneer Das. Now the company is almost flattened out. Its generations have changed. But when that man was there, VG Paneer Das, he extended credit on watches and transistors, which was like ₹100 item at that time, long back. ₹100 a lot of value. He sold it to the gypsies who lived in a place called Pallavaram. Now it's fully developed. That time it was just a wasteland. Leather factories were there. I mean, they didn't have addresses. They didn't know how to sign or write. He noted down some detail in a pocket book and he just sold them watches and transistors. They never had a bad debt. Of course, today it is a company is very big now, it's okay. But what I'm trying to say is, maybe at that level, if somebody trusted them, they didn't want to cheat that person. That was more of the ethics took the major, was the first most important E. We have similar stories in so many cases. In other rags to riches stories, we are talking about taking care of the people. In Andhra, there's something called the Andhra Sugars. That man was a legend. He's no more now. Now, he based his entire thing on his lifestyle on one of the British collectors called Arthur Cotton. He said, factory will run fine, no problem, but let me take care of the workers. So he brought drinking water to the workers' villages, he put roads, all at his cost. He said, forget the profit. So then what happened was the worker royalty, because I went late in my life to see that. But I keep asking them, then they say, my grandfather worked here, father worked here. I said, don't you ever think of leaving? They didn't think of leaving because they thought that he was more like a father figure and a god figure rather than an employer. So there are many things when you start your audits. We say retention policy, we talk about incentives and quality of life and whatever something we talk about. But there are other reasons also. So the more you study case studies or more audits you do, I'm sure we will end up with more knowledge. Now, before I go to my next document, can you just photograph this slide? That's my Gmail account. Feel free to mail me for anything you want. As long as I know it, I'll explain. I mean, I don't know a lot of things, but whatever I know, I'll definitely share with you. So if you can just take a picture of this slide, feel free to mail me. I'll send it to you, no problem. So if you have done that, I'll just change the file. Yeah, I have to share the next file. I'll do that. Okay, now if you looked at this file, it's a Word file, and I'll just make it a little bigger. Okay. The same thing, say 7E's only, but I got a little more detail here. That's why I said I'll mail this file to you. Those of you who wish to create your own checklists, audit programs, or even try out on a sample basis some audit, or maybe you want to lecture somewhere else, you go ahead. Feel free to use all the stuff which I've used. Okay, now we're talking about the economy part of it, the first part. The terms here, we talk about cost benefit analysis. Just made a small note what it is. Then we talk about the price or rate analysis. That's another measure you use when you're working on the economy. So this comparing bids and so on. See, the thing is, today we do global comparisons. You want to import from China, you want to import from Brazil or Burma or somewhere. You may also do a local price comparison. Invariably fine. We are always importing because it's cheaper. Okay, anyway, I'm not saying it's good or bad, but that's a fact. Okay, so we need to be keep comparing to make sure we are running things economically. And then we also need one more is called the benchmarking. Industry standards can be obtained from number of people, including MSME units, associations of manufacturers. We have these trade directories. Financially, of course, we can take from so many places, but I'm talking about other things like quality, accidents, material quality, transportation, deterioration. So many things we have to look at. Benchmark data is available. Today, it's available. Sometimes you have to buy it. It's not always free. And then trend analysis, where you're looking at historic to track something. But let me also add this one. Trend is not always correct because we are a fast changing economy. So what happened in the past may not make sense now. So that is why when you are using trends, you have to use weighted averages. Reduce the weights where the things are getting obsolete, increase the weights where things are becoming more relevant. For instance, bricks were used in construction, particularly in the cities. They took a lot of cement. Brick was very small in size. Now we use cinder blocks. They're much bigger, lighter. A bigger block means less cement used. They're also thermal insulation is very good. So most of the flat builders, after they finish with the skeleton, the steel, whatever, the pillars and girders, they use cinder blocks for the construction. So flooring material also same thing. We use tiles, vitreous tiles, whatever. Of course, if you can afford it, use marble and granite, but otherwise, tile. So in the past, if you see, they use bricks, they use normal cement. They had Madras roof, terrace, whatever they used. The flooring was actually not tiles. It used to be red cement, or they had mosaic, or various alternatives. You don't see them now. So that's why a trend is not very good. So I'm a little careful with that. Value engineering has become extremely important because whatever a customer doesn't pay for, you don't put it in the product, you just throw it out. Now, when you put electric windows, you don't have to put a manual winder on it. But actually, in one of the early cases, very early cases, you can see it on the internet. In Bombay, there was a flood. They had a mix of traditional cheap small cars and the expensive. I think those days it was the Corolla and the Ford and Toyotas and Ford and so on, where they had electric windows and they didn't have a winder. And as usual, our people will drive into the water. It's some wrong psychology, but they do it. So when they got into the water, the electrics obviously short circuited, and those are the small cars, all these Marutis and all that. They had the window winder. They could open the doors and all mechanical doors, door openers. They got out. They either went off or they sat on the roof. The luxury car, because they didn't have the winding knob and everything was electric, the door wouldn't open. Unfortunately, some people died. They couldn't break the glass easily because the glass is very strong on those expensive cars. So again, we have some problems. In India, actually, it pays to have lousy glass, and particularly if you're driving the city, long distance, okay, stronger, better. But it should be you should be able to exit in case of a flash flood or something. And I'm giving you some rare examples. Once in a way, it happens. So value engineering is used all the time, whether it's your cap, a bottle cap, or your pen cap or whatever it is. You keep on removing things which people are not paying for. We are talking about packaging. Packaging is a full industry. There's a 4-year engineering course on packaging, but that's a real complicated packaging. Then we have the procurement reviews. Everything right from actually today, I think most of these are done by the computer. All these parameters are fed in. It's called procurement parameter processing. There's a separate course for that, and all the details are picked up. Comparisons are done. Earlier, they used to use spreadsheets and some tender evaluation. This way, committees sit and opening stuff and checking numbers. Today, it's all done by the machine, and they also compare a lot of other data. Particularly, we have big data access, but you have to be careful because not all machine learning produces correct results. It does make some mistakes, but see, the better the data, the less mistakes, or it doesn't make mistakes. If you have someone who understands machine learning and AI, they will write the program or the data or whatever the AI prompts or whatever in such a way that you don't get hallucination. Hallucination is the mistakes. Okay, so that procurement part can automatically do it manually also. And then activity-based costing. Now this is like each whatever you do, like a medical diagnosis machine. You're doing blood sample analysis. You have to put some reagent into it. You have to run the electrical motor has to spin it. Let's say it takes 30 samples. Whether you do 1 sample or 30 samples, the cost is the same because the reagent cost is the only thing you save. Everything else is going to cost you the same. Emergency blood samples are run at less than 30. Full production means okay 30. Now that costing is important because you should know, are you making or losing money? Already, I think you're aware, National Health Service, the NHS in UK, their blood samples come to Mumbai it comes in the night time. There's a courier plane which brings it. They're analyzed here in India and you don't have to send the sample back. Sample is destroyed. The results are uploaded on the internet. Same for teleradiologist. Okay. There are a lot of Gujarat registered doctors who have come back to India, senior doctors who still have state licenses. The telemedicine, what is the radiology report comes here, they give the feedback and it's uploaded. And of course, telemedicine is picking up within India itself. Apollo hospitals do it, Ramchandra does it, and so on. Okay, anyway, talking ABC is becoming relevant where it used to be a theoretical class at one time. So if you look at the break-even analysis, we understand this cost volume, profit. Then contract compliance audits, okay, these are all the legal stuff. Okay, then inventory and asset management review. You have to do this because you have to see whether all your levels are being properly managed or not. So you have stock outs, they call it buffer, drum buffer role, where between processes you are maintaining excess stock to take care of how things are shifted up and down and so on. So that's again, that means your rework queues and maximum, minimum safety stock, they're not static. They keep changing dynamically. Okay, then we have this integration where you put a lot of things together and then you try to see how it works. That's okay, that's fine. Tools and techniques. Here I see I'm trying not to bring in too much of computerization, but we have to use some computer stuff. We have to use Excels, Power BI, Tableau, anything your choice. KNIME is better. KNIME, open source. You can download it and learn it up on YouTube. And of course, we can use some, to a very large extent, we can use the AI, free AI tools also. I mean, just to get going with it. So if you look at second one on the efficiency, now we look at the various tools, time and motion study, which I mentioned. Benchmarking, as I told you, we can again, but you have to get data from somewhere. Then we look at the KPIs, where you look at output per hour. See, these things are more on the manufacturing side. Now, if you are looking at a cook, somebody is cooking, but as the kitchen gets bigger, we're talking about cloud kitchens, it gets so big, there are no cooks in that kitchen. Everything is automated. Like how many bakers will Britannia or Modern Bread hire? Nobody. It's all machine run, manufactured. So as your size of the kitchen increases, like India sends 2 plane loads of biryani from Hyderabad to the Gulf. to aircraft, what do you call, transport aircraft, okay, the freight aircraft. They take it there. Then you got large cloud kitchens like Rebel Foods and so on, very big kitchens, runs 6, 7, 8 brands, and obviously they don't have cooks. I mean, they'll have cooks for the testing, small volumes. As you get larger, can't do it. So that's why don't depend on what I put here. I'm trying to keep it class for everybody. But those who want to go ahead, you can start reading case studies on Indian case studies on cloud kitchens, wherever there's bulk, whatever we are doing. Okay, then another thing is this process mapping and flow charting. Actually, I suggest you start with BPMN, business process mapping notation, because that's a standard. You can generate code from it. The other one is, of course, UML. Some customers will ask for it, but needs a little bit of programming stuff, or you have to read UML as a separate book, Unified Modeling Language. I find the banks normally they want their software to be mapped in UML because they are totally confused about what their software is doing. So, okay, this is the flowchart part. Actually, years ago in CA, there was a subject called systems analysis and data processing. The first question, compulsory question, was 20-25 marks, raw flowchart. So now we don't use that anymore, but we can go back to it, no problem. Then we have ratios. What kind of ratios? Okay, we put some ratios here, but spend some time going and reading up on startup ratios, fraud discovery ratios, like we have Benish, Altman, Z-score, and so on. Startup ratios. We go to the newer ratios. The traditional ones are more or less over. Then we have the capacity utilization reviews, where we talk in terms of how do we use the capacity now. I'm giving an example of a paint company. They have to produce thousands of colors of paint. Earlier, it was only limited colors, rainbow colors and some red oxide and something like that. Today, they got a shade card, you got numbers on them, you got thousands of colors. How do they manufacture them? They don't. They make only white paint. The white paint is sent to all the distribution centers. The dyes are also sent there. The moment you give a computer color from the shade card, the operator there will punch in that code, and let's say it's a 1 liter paint you're buying, he puts the can, it drops 1 liter white paint and the correct dye, can be a mixture of dyes also, and mixes it up, and then your color is produced right in front of you on demand. So which means you can have any mix, thousands of mix of colors. It doesn't matter. You only got dyes and you have the white paint. So these are the things when we audit them. You have to see that using much lower capacity systems, you are able to produce much higher quantity, variety, volumes. There's so many things you can do. Paint was just an example. That's there in your Subway sandwiches. Of course, they make it manually. That's there in a lot of places if you look at it. Or if you are familiar with KFC, most of the food is pre-cooked and brought, and then it's only heated or fried or whatever. Same thing applies to your McCain, which produces those uh, fries, potato fries. These are all case studies available. Okay. Then we do a workload analysis. Okay, so peaks and surge loads and all kinds of things you can do it. And then we talk about, okay, this automation, etc. business. Okay, I will avoid the software, but okay, we can look at a few, like say PSPP or Excel, Power BI, some of those, simpler ones. Then you have cost versus output analysis. See, sometimes we cut cost and the output suffers, like early cropping incentive on sugar cane. You don't get enough yield, so it's a problem. Then sweetness of sugar, again a problem. So in India now, instead of working with these sugar cane, growing sugar cane and making sugar, where you have all kinds of problems, cane commissioner, allocation of land, it's a big process, and it's a seasonal crop. What India is now doing is the newer ones, not the traditional ones. They import raw sugar from Australia and Brazil, or South America, mostly Brazil, and they produce refined sugar, which they send back. Factories work 365 days a year, and there's no cane commissioner, land, there's that early cropping incentive, parasites, pesticides, weedicides, absolutely nothing is there. So you can look at the sugar industry in India. You could probably we can learn a lot on how it has changed over the years. Okay, then we have staff feedback and whatever. This is best done by observation method, or you need to have a controlled self-assessment. Okay, we put all the techniques together. Now let's go to the assessment of the effectiveness. Okay, there we have some things. We have goal setting and alignment, whether we are excess setting or short setting. Then we have how do we measure these outcomes. Okay, there are many ways you can measure it. Instead of only looking at our quality, we can also look at customer satisfaction. I already mentioned surveys, but you can do it in so many ways, feedback, so many things. So, and balance scorecard, I didn't put a picture here, but you have 4 quadrants, and then you try to see the impact on the finance and marketing and so on. And then you try to, okay, so here internal process, so on. So what you do is you try to see which one of these processes is really the bottleneck and which one is actually helping you with the business. Balance scorecard is a very old audit technique, so easily available. Okay, then we have the what are the KPIs here? Okay, and there's something called a root cause analysis. I'm not sure if I put it down here, but okay, the root cause analysis, we normally have a drawing called the fishbone diagram. It's also called the Ishikawa diagram. So yeah, well, must have forgotten. It's okay. It is okay. 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 We'll have something called the fishbone diagram or the Ishikawa diagram, which looks like a fish with just the bones. And you're trying to find out for each problem, what is the cause? What caused the problem? So we can easily understand that if you draw the diagram, and then you'll know what is happening. See, when you take a restaurant, a high-end restaurant, we say the restaurant should have 3 times the crockery needed, crockery and cutlery, because the dishes are not washed immediately. They're only dumped. Once you finish eating, they put it in a place. They wash all the dishes at the same time. They have to use hot water. There's probably an automated line. So what happens is you need to have 3 times the volume. What if you take a small restaurant? I mean, obviously, he doesn't have that kind of money. So he has lesser number of dishes, which means he has to keep pulling them out from the customer as soon as they finish and get them washed immediately and bring them back. So cost wise, you have to see whether accumulating and washing in one go is cheaper, or having investment in more crockery, pulling them out and washing each one individually and bringing them back is cheaper. Now these are the kind of stuff which helps you to understand why you're struggling with shortage of crockery or your working capital or so many things, or customer dissatisfaction, they go away and so on. Okay, surveys we understand, performance appraisals also we understand. Okay, cost versus impact, again same thing but slightly differently here, because we are looking at the effectiveness, efficiency, 2 different things but almost the same answer. But one is just achieving the output, other is achieving it at the lowest cost or at the optimal resource utilization. Now trend and historic, I put it here because it is traditionally what we teach. But I would like you to go a little slow on this, because India being a fast growing country, a lot of things have changed now. So we cannot really depend on the past, particularly if you have big data, 20 years, 15 years, don't rely on it, because 20 years back, they had ice coolers. You put broken ice, put cool drinks inside. Today, almost every shop has got a fridge. So there's no problem there. So things have changed. Okay, scenario planning and stress testing, this is important. We say simulation, it's actually a OR, operation research or quantitative techniques method. You can simulate, but if you get into more things like seasonal and preferences and so on, then you use the sensitivity analysis. Try to work with the PSPP. Then if you want more, just mail me, I'll send you some Python scripts. You can use them either in Power BI, or you can just run them using VS, Visual Studio Code, or any of those tools, PyCharm, or even there's an online Python program. Okay, so, okay, now if you come to the ethics part of it, how do you review it? Okay, policies, code, conduct, etc. Compliance testing. See, this anti-corruption is very important. They have the FCPA, Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. You're not supposed to bribe. You have the Anti-Bribery Act in UK. We also have, but we don't pay much attention to it. If you are caught paying money to get an order or something, then there's a lot of problems. Walmart and Reliance had that problem. I think somebody else also had the problem. So you could just go back to India, case studies will find them. Okay, then we have interviews and try to find out how the ethical climate here means. How do people view ethics? I mean, if you're allowed a meal, they say you can eat as much as you want, but you can't pack anything to take home. Uh, but in some companies, they actually give you a packet, tea time, morning time, evening time. Say take it home and whatever. So again, it will be highly location specific, geo specific. Whistleblower grievance, we already know. Okay, we have this related party transaction analysis. Okay, we are talking about this contractors and all those, but I also wanted to look at grapevine. Grapevine was very important because Roosevelt, I think the American president, was the one who had, though the FBI worked, he had his own set of informers. Okay, now in a company also same thing can happen. You can cut across maybe the MD and maybe the CFO, or forget the CFO, maybe MD and the watchman may be doing some errand. Watchman's wife works as a maid in the MD's house. She'll pick up some gossip and pass it on. So you need to look at those. It goes beyond the legal definition of a related party. Okay, then we have to talk about the ethical risk assessment. Okay, then we have these behavioral audits. Then we have awareness and training programs. Okay, so then we talk about the audit trail and documentation review. Okay, now see, this is not the financial audit trail. This is completely different. This is, we want to know how they react to situations, how do they handle things, which has got nothing to do with the financial audit trail, company law, nothing to do with that. This is basically a log, LOG. Now what happens is, because of these cameras, the CC cameras, the whatever the images they produce are not actually viewed by people. Instead, they are analyzed by software. Though that software existed long back, image signal processing and digital signal processing, today they actually process it using software. And anything wrong, like a person in a location where he's not supposed to be, it identifies through patterns. Or people congregating near the water cooler and talking. Those kind of scenarios are immediately tagged. Maybe you have it in your house or office. You can look for people, you can look for motor vehicles. Okay, it's beyond that. You can look for congregation of people, you can look for individuals who are not supposed to be in a particular location, and it immediately highlights those as we call them outliers or exceptions. You can find out. That's the audit trail, because it's easy today because we have automation. Okay, then we have these ethical dilemmas and so on, and this is actually a big problem because let's say your boss comes and tells you, I mean, it's not going to kill the company. It's a small problem, some petty thing, but it's wrong. Okay, whatever it's like. Now he tells you, okay, forget this. We had to do this in emergency, so just overlook it. You can overlook it, but then how important is it? So we always talk about the WorldCom case where the lady called Cynthia Cooper, internal auditor, blew the whistle. Yeah, we understand, but that was a big fraud. But something smaller, I mean, it doesn't really make a difference. No, this is where your judgment comes in. Auditor's judgment comes in. Okay, then if you looked at the equity, okay, policies, whatever, then anti-discrimination laws, we have a lot of them, we don't use them. Okay, be a little careful when you're dealing with these tribals and lot of things, but particularly factories or production locations, we have to be very careful. Fishing, a lot of rules are there. And then benefit analysis is fine, stakeholder report is fine, grievance complaint. Okay, these are what we always use. Okay, now we got a new thing called inclusion metrics. Now, inclusion means, okay, I make it very simple to you. Now, if you're a lending organization and you're lending to these, not necessarily poor people, but people who are not on the financial radar, they have no credit rating, credit scoring, nothing is there. Then you build your own financial rating model. The original model was built by the US. In the US, they had a Fair Isaac score. That's the FICO, FICO, Fair Isaac score. Now, that was used to rate people, and of course, we borrowed a lot of it. We have the CIBIL, we have some high mark. Okay, so many companies are there. But then what happened was that it didn't serve a purpose. So many of the housing finance and small finance, what they did was they started building their own models for second-hand vehicle loans, for loan against property for and the lower level of people, microfinance, whatever institutions. Now those models, we have a lot of those models in India. I don't know if you'll get it on the internet, but if you need them, please mail me. They are there with groups, they're there with the research students. So they work with these models where you're not talking about did you pay your loan correctly, how much you're earning, and all that. This is based more on the community you live in, what is the ethics in that community, the location, uh, previous. I mean, you're looking at do they help strangers? Are they honest? You know, there are a lot of things we look at, and based on that, you arrive at the score. We call it honor. I mean, they take a loan, they feel they have to return it. Those kind of things. I mean, a lot of factors. Something like you do in an IFRS 9 or Ind AS 109. You work with the ECL, the credit loss part of it. After the formula is over, you'll get macroeconomic parameters. That is what I'm talking about. So based on that, you build your score. So diversity, you want to see ethically, yes, are we really doing it? Then equal opportunity audits. Okay, if there are two people, particularly if they are handicapped or if they don't have, like we say, okay, you have to pay a deposit to be a franchisee or something like that, and they don't have the money. How do we handle it? Okay, access and accommodation review, we know, and okay, supplier and vendor equity also is. You shouldn't favor any particular person. So this is again a big problem because we have this MSME preferences where we paid earlier, and we also have certain vendors with certain rules. Like we have, say, it's a large organization, you have small contract, you have enrollment, empanelment for small contractors, empanelment for large contractors. It's a difference. Okay, so we have to work with that. Okay, anyway, that's fine. Particularly seaports and all that. Okay, then we go to the environment. There's a policy. You have a regulatory compliance and testing. Okay, then we come to resource consumption. See, one of the things here is they use a lot of things like air quality analysis. They use effluent treatment analysis. A lot of stuff is used. Now, most of these are machines which may produce output, but we don't log it. So you have to tell the client, you have to log it at least for a week or 10 days. I need the information, then use it. Same thing for waste and emission. Everything, see, once you take a vehicle for testing, pollution test is done, the certificate goes with you. But you may want to know whether the emission test is really improving something. So we need to look at a lot. It's a very difficult. See, some of these areas, see, without pollution, you can't produce certain stuff. And without damaging things, you can't do certain things. So what the developed countries do is they pass it on to us. For instance, all the adhesives you are using, most of them, they are not resin based. They are not based on what a tree oozes out or something. These are chemicals made from cashew nut shell, which is poison. Cashew nut is fine, you can eat it, but shell we can make some poison. Like a super glue is poison. Lot of glues are poison. But we make all the glues because the developed countries don't want to make it. Teflon coating is a very polluting process, but we make all the Teflon coating stuff to be exported. Or maybe the base thing comes in, only the coating is applied here and then re-exported. They call it 100% EOU. So there's a name for that. Okay, so whatever it is. Okay. Anyway, then we look at the supply chain. sustainability, particularly with shipping, and actually supply chain is now used even for data, cybercrime, wherever you want to apply it. Okay. Okay, then environmental risk, yes. Okay, life cycle assessment, again, we need to have flowcharts for this. How does it happen to the entire life cycle? The best example would be organic farming, where you can look at it's called farm to freezer or farm to fork. So fork will be your chicken and all that stuff, but farm to freezer will be your vegetables also. You can look at organic farming. India is a big player in that. You can go to the entire chain of organic farming, return on investment, insurance, everything. So then we have the performance indicators. Okay, we have, like this is not sufficient. There are a lot of performance indicators. I suggest we look at organic farming. So that's the best. In India, that's the easiest thing, where the supply chain is one continuous run. Okay, then site inspection, okay, stakeholder, community, etc., whatever. Okay. So now that we have gone through some of this, and then we go to the empowerment. Okay, we have the delegation frameworks, training. I told you how to evaluate training, employee engagement, satisfaction, and all that. And then, of course, okay, almost what I told you earlier, the same thing. Statistical techniques alone we'll have to bring in, because empowerment, again, you need to use some mathematical technique. Otherwise, I told you, if you look at grant audit, how effective it is, it'll make a lot of sense. Okay, now before I actually finish, I may just take a few minutes. I won't take too long. Um, I just want to show you some slides. That's it. Oh no, sorry, open the wrong file. Is the screen sharing? Can you see something called internal audit?
No, sir. I think the earlier Word file is still visible on the screen.
Okay, okay. I'll change it. I'll change it.
Yeah.
Is it visible now?
Yes, sir. Is it
Okay.
visible?
Basically, what I'm trying to do is, see, I specifically picked up from the Google image a Power BI dashboard, because Power BI desktop version is free. You can download it. Full version, there's no limitation. One of the few things you get free from Microsoft. So you can use it. Tableau's cloud version is free, and NIME is open source, completely free. Okay, what we're trying to say is, if you're doing something on internal audit and making a presentation, a dashboard like this would make more sense. Of course, if you want to read more on this, you read more on visualization. That's the topic which addresses all these graphs. So the other picture I wanted to show you is, when we say diversity, one of the areas we looked at. So you start looking at things like hiring and whatever, promotions and turnover and so on. Those who want to use more of visualization, you can read a book called Storytelling Using Data Through Data, or you can just search for it, you'll find it. What we are trying to say is, okay, if you find sales dropping in one chart, marketing chart, sales chart, in another chart, you find labor attrition in a particular area. But when you superimpose both and you find where the attrition is high, sales has dropped, then it helps you to make a better decision that because of manpower shortage, sales has dropped. So you need to, bring those together. That's why you call it as storytelling through data. Whenever you want to demonstrate something, you need to bring some value to the whoever is watching the demonstration. So that's why when I spoke of this audit also, you need to do a little more explanation through these drawings. And same thing here. So once you do something, then somebody can read the data, they can understand better. Juniors are staying back, old people are staying back. How's the secondment process done? those kind of things. I got another picture pasted here. Same thing, but slightly different things, like executive gender balance. I see one of the things we generally find is um, once they get married, there's a gap until the children reach a certain age. Okay, that's a traditional problem in India where the man is the, I don't know what, wage earner and breadwinner or whatever. Now, particularly when you're in the middle level, tactical and operational management, it's very difficult to convince people to come to work. So now what they've done is like these, India traditionally BD factory, this explosives, not explosives, fireworks. They let the people take the work home and do it at home rather than come to the office. But now what I'm trying to say is, I gave some example of a book binding. So Macmillan's a big publishing firm. Of course, books are gone now, it's electronic. But anyway, what they do is they let you take this work home. I think it's stolen. Okay, you trust them, so maybe they'll steal, but we have to figure something out. Let them take it home, work with it at their convenience, bring it back, earn. And the guarantee is one, they didn't lose touch with the business or the operations. Second is at some point when they want to go back to work, they'll come back to only that company. They're not even looking at an alternative because the loyalty factor is pretty high, particularly the lower level employees. So if you look at the ESG part, this maps, unfortunately, Power BI works with maps from Bing, B-I-N-G. It doesn't use the Google Maps. Google Maps is better, but that's okay. That's not a problem. Okay, now what we are saying is pollution-wise, we are trying to talk about, how good we are, how bad we are, and what is polluting, not polluting, geo. Actually, if you see if a state in India is polluting more, it means it has more manufacturing. Now, if you take a state like Bengal, they have surplus of electricity. There's no industry, so they put it in the grid. Less pollution, no, nothing except small factories. But if you take a place like Delhi, there's huge pollution, not because of them, but because of the neighboring states. So these are, you need to interpret more of the story so that people understand how it works. Okay, so I think now I can take all your, if you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, also I will have to put this last slide back. So I leave my mail with you. Yeah, this is my mail. So if you have missed the photograph or whatever, you can photograph it now. So you can look at this. Send me the mail. That's okay, but I think we'll just go back to our moderator for today. Any questions which have come up?
Sir, no, sir, while we don't have any questions, but I'm sure through your very detailed and a very, through examples which you have quoted, there must have been much to take upon by the participants. My participants, please note that the sir has also shared the email ID from where you can reach out, or also you can reach out to the IASB board. Now, I move towards word of thanks. It's my privilege that the ISB has granted this opportunity to me to propose the vote of thanks. And for this, firstly, I sincerely thanks all my dignitaries who were there. Also, I express my sincere thanks to Paul sir for giving examples, very day-to-day examples, and explaining every concept so detailed and so beautifully that that made the session definitely interesting. Also, I would like to thank the supporting team for ensuring that this session goes well. And with this, and finally, I would like to extend my thanks to all the participants for joining this session and making it worth. With this, we formally conclude this webinar. So I wish you all a very great success and a great evening ahead. Thank you, Paul, sir, once again.
Thank you
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.